Hey everybody, so today I wanted to do a market overview video just on the technicals. I know there is a lot of pain out there, but I'm telling you that right now we could see a very, very big move here in the very short term future. Now, this big move can either be to the upside or to the downside, and I'm going to explain why we're at such a pivotal point right now in the charts. So I'm going to start with Apple. Apple is a big market mover. It's one of the top stocks in every big ETF. So I'm not even going to bother looking at the moving averages just because we're so below them. And you know what? I know I just said I'm not going to bother, but let me just show you. So yeah, we're way, way far away from the 50-day moving average. We're pretty darn far away from the 100-day moving average. And just look at today. Apple fell 5.18%. That's a lot. And just look at how we knifed down. So when we fell underneath this trend channel, let me take the moving averages out. Now, when I zoom out, you can see this broad trend channel. So when we fell underneath this trend channel, we just knifed down. As you can see, we had this tiny little move right here, and then we basically almost retested this and then knifed down. So where are we right now? Well, let me show you something here. So I'm just going to get rid of this trend line right here so you can see this a little bit more clear. So when I'm connecting these bottoms right here, see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every single time we hit this bottom trend line, we had a massive move, you know. So right here, 152 to 168, 150 to 180. Right here, 154 to 176, and right here 158 all the way to 182. So, you know, if history repeats itself, what I'm thinking is going to happen is that here in the next few days, you know, maybe the end of the week, we could see a pretty big rally here. And, you know, we could potentially hit the top of this trend line again, you know, maybe around 158. Let me throw on the moving averages again. So maybe we can make it to this 200-day moving average around 159, quite possibly. And we could reject again. You know, I still think overall the macros are very bearish. I mean, the CPI today wasn't very good. You know, month over month came in pretty terrible. And, you know, we're still below 8.5 year over year, but it was still above expected, which was 8.1. So still pretty bad. So what I'm expecting here is that we could bounce right here. But there is a big risk that I need to let you know, is that if we don't bounce right here, we'll just look at where the next level is. If we just knife right down and we just ignore this trend line right here, and we bounced off this trend line the last 3 times, if we just completely ignore this trend line right here, then we could knife all the way down to 136. So this could get pretty risky. And you know, if this knifes down all the way to 136, I happen to think SPY will be in the 380s. So one thing that I would say really, really, really pay attention to is this volume profile. So you can see that every time we're on high volume, or every time we moved up on pretty low volume. And then when we're selling, you know, we're having this high volume. So we could see this again and again. So when we start seeing volume kind of taper off, that could be a sign that, you know, maybe we're going to rally. You know, maybe we hit the top of this trend line, which is around like 158, 159, which happens to coincide with the 200-day moving average. So we could get a hard reject off the 200-day moving average, or we could fall back into this trend channel. But, you know, I just don't think that there's enough in the macros to justify a very, very strong move to the upside that will get us back in this trend channel. I could be wrong, but, you know, I just feel like if we do have a bull rally, it's going to get faded. And it's going to get faded pretty quickly. So I happen to think that any bull rally is actually going to be a bear rally and just shorts covering at technical areas, just like this one right here. So I do think that we could see a pretty decent sized rally, just given also that Apple fell 5% today. And I mean, just look at 5 days. In the last 5 days, we went all the way from 166 to 146. So we fell $20 on Apple. And $20 on Apple that's like a little bit less than 10%. That's like 8%. So it's not all that great. Actually, not 8%, like 7%. It's like 7%. So yeah, in the last 5 days, we fell about 7% on Apple. So keep that in mind that we could be at critical support, and this support trend line has literally reduced every single one of these massive bounces, and we're right here again. Could hit the top of this. I mean, you don't want to be shorting right here. If you're shorting right here, you're shorting at support. So let things play out. If we bounce from here, that could be very bullish in the short term. If we fade below this, then that's going to be the capitulation that everybody is talking about. And we're going to see that 135 on Apple. And that's going to be nasty. And I want you to be prepared for that. So definitely look out for that. That could happen. It's very, very likely. Just as likely as it is that we bounce right here. So we're at a very, very pivotal point. Now moving on, I'm going to talk about NASDAQ, the QQQ. So there's three things I want to point out. We're seeing the same type of trend line. So this is almost the same thing that we saw on Apple, Every single time we hit this bottom trend line, we produced a massive bounce. Massive bounce. Massive bounce. Now, see, we're right here again. But look, there's also this trend line. This trend line used to be resistance. And then we broke out of it. And then now we're fading. But look, now this resistance trend line is meeting up with this support trend line, which is also meeting up with the bottom of this trend channel. So we have a three-way intersection right here at about 290. So right at about 290, we have this three-way intersection. So we could produce a pretty decent sized bounce, maybe all the way up to about like 315 possibly, before we hit some serious resistance here on this trend line. Or if we're looking at this broader trend line, we could go maybe all the way back here to 346. I don't think that's likely, but you never know. I mean, I wasn't expecting this move right here. So we could see a move like that. I mean, just given the magnitude of our sell-off, possible, but I don't think it's as likely. I think the more likely scenario is that we could see like 315 and then we just fade, and then, we mess around. Maybe we go sideways for a little bit, draw out another bear flag before we fall again. So I do think that the selling will subside a little bit here. I could be totally wrong. Now keep in mind, if I'm wrong and we just completely knife below this three-way intersection, then I'm going to show you what's next. What's next is all the way down here at 260. Now that looks very, very ugly. Now on 260, oh boy, that would put NASDAQ almost at like a 30% correction. I mean, we could do the math right here. Maybe not, maybe not. My computer's lagging a little bit. Sometimes it does this. Nope, you got it. Oh, okay, there we go. So let's just do the math. So if NASDAQ falls, or if QQQ falls all the way to 259, what is that? So that's 407.69 minus 259 equals 148, and then we're going to divide that by 407.68. Multiply that by 100. At this point right here, that's NASDAQ at a 36.47% crash. I think, no matter what the macros are, no matter how negative things get, I think you got to be a buyer at this level right here at 359. Let me just zoom out. At 359, we're pretty damn close to these pandemic highs. So that's another 30 points down. So, if I was totally out of the markets, just holding cash, which I'm not. I'm getting screwed just like you guys. I would be buying maybe right here and right here. So that's at 259 and at 232. I think at these levels, if you're young, you have a lot of time to see this come back up. So I think at these levels, you would be safe buying. And if you can afford 100 shares, you can always do something called covered calls. And if you don't know too much about that, I'm going to have you just do your own research on this. I mean, I could talk about it real quick here. Let's just talk about it real quick here. So, for example, if I'm going to talk about covered calls, this requires you to own 100 shares. And it's basically the opposite of long options. You're shorting. So let's say if I were to buy 100 shares of QQQ right now at around 292, and let's say I was just going to sell it right at the strike price, and I want to go out all the way until November of 2022, which we don't have one, but I guess the closest one is probably September 30th. Or I guess we could go to December. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to December 22. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm predicting us to fall even more around midterm elections. So I think midterm elections is going to cause a lot of volatility in the markets, and we're going to see a pretty decent sell-off. So let's say I'm just going to sell covered calls at 292, which we don't have strikes for this. It goes by fives. So let's just do 295 for December 2022. And I were to just buy 100 shares right now. So if I bought 100 shares right now and then I shorted it through a covered call and sold a call at 295 for December 2022, well then I have around $29 of downside protection, which is pretty decent, So if we were to fall even more, then what I could do is that, I could totally just close my call, I could take my profits, and I could just sell another call. So I could just ride the wave down if I were to buy 100 shares right now. And there's always risk to this. I mean, if this falls significantly more, well then now you have QQQ at 292. So maybe that's not as maybe that's just not as attractive. But let's say that QQQ is higher at this time, then what happens is that I have to sell at 295, or I could take a loss and I could roll it out even further. So I guess if I were to just sell the covered call and I don't touch it, I don't do anything with it, and I just wait until that time frame, December of 2022, then what happens is that basically I'm forced to sell it at 295 if it's above 295. But what happens is that I get this $29-ish of premium, and that's $29 a share, so that's like almost $3,000. So that's not a bad deal. You have about $3,000 of downside protection if you buy from here. So, that would be around like SPY or QQQ 261. So that's really not bad. So that would be like right here, what we talked about, which would be that 35% crash level. So, there's just an idea. Now, let's look at the next. Let's look at SPY. So the exact same thing is going on here in SPY, and we're seeing this on multiple charts. That's why I'm saying that right now we're at such a pivotal point. Look right here. We have the same trend line. Right here, we touched right here, had this massive rally, touched right here, massive rally. And now look, we're down here again. We have this top trend line, which acted as prior resistance. We have this bottom trend line. All three trend lines are intersecting at this one point, which is right around here at around 392. And we tapped that. See, look here. Today's low was 391.96. We bounced a little bit off that. And look, after hours, we're 394. So, it could very well happen that we see this massive rally and we could go all the way back to 414 here. So don't discount this, that this could happen. We could see this rally. It's, we've seen it twice before. Here's proof, living proof that we saw this rally off this trend channel or off this trend line, I mean. And we have this three-way intersection. Now, keep in mind, if I'm wrong, look what the downside looks like. This is horrible. I mean, we could continue down this trend line, or we could just completely ignore it, knife down below it, and the next thing you know, we're at SPY 350s. I mean, there's very, very little support below this, and this area isn't even that strong of a support. What makes this area strong of a support is this trend line, followed by this trend line and this trend line. This three-way intersection is what makes this a stronger support than any of these supports down here, which are very, very weak supports. The next strongest support we could see after this one is going to be this 350 area. Now, that's going to equivalent to Microsoft being very, very low. Apple, it's going to be like in the 120s possibly. So if we do see the SPY sell-off to like 351, then yeah, we could see Apple at like 120. We could see Microsoft in the low teens. And by teens, I mean, let's just look up what Microsoft price is right now. If we see SPY fall that low, then what I think could happen is we could see Microsoft all the way down here at 236. And I'd say like the worst you'd see it is at like 189. That would be like a knee-jerk reaction, just complete capitulation and people just totally giving up. That's where I think we could see this. But I think more likely we could see Microsoft at this 236 level. SPY, which is the exact same thing that's going on in QQQ. Now, one more thing. XLF. So here on XLF, this is something different. Like this is kind of what worries me a little bit. Now we see this trend line. We bounced off it plenty of times before. Right here, right here, right here, right here. But now this time we knifed below it. So I'm going to zoom in here. And we knifed on a shooting star type pattern. So this to me is a little bit worrisome. Which, you know, this could happen to SPY too, if this just continues to fall. Because this is the financials. Financials play a big part in SPY. But I do recognize that right now, we're in a falling wedge. So I would pay attention to financials too. If we start moving a little sideways on financials and we break out of this wedge, then I think that's going to give us the mojo for SPY to start rallying a little bit, even if it's just a small relief rally. Now, if we do see this, you know, I'm recognizing that we also, we're in a trend channel that could also be within a falling wedge. So we could have two patterns going on here. We could have this falling wedge and this trend channel. So if we do have this trend channel, then yeah, I could see us hitting this right here around 34.91 and then rejecting even longer, even further, I mean. So, I mean, the financial sector does not look too good. But do recognize that as of now, we are in this falling wedge and we could be in a trend channel. Look at DIA, which is the Dow. Now the Dow to me is a little bit more worrisome because, see, look, we have the same trend line and we bounced off it the last 3 times. But look at where this trend line is. It's all the way down here at 307. We have quite a ways to fall if we're actually going to hit this bottom trend line, which is the trend line that triggers these rallies. So to me, this is what worries me a little bit. But also look, we're at a pretty, I would say that this is probably like the most significant support outside of this support right here. Took down this support, I mean, we really started knifing down. But I would say that this support is also pretty significant because it was clearly resistance right here. And then we rallied, and then we touched this area right here again, just to bounce off prior resistance, which is now acting as support. So it's kind of a weak support, but it is probably the strongest support that we're going to see in a while. until we hit this area right here at around 294. So outside of that, and then when we zoom out, I mean, maybe not 294. I would say maybe this pandemic high would act as a better support. So 285. So honestly, when stocks are falling in this interest rate environment, generally this interest rate and inflation environment, generally the Nasdaq is going to hurt the most. The Dow is going to hurt the least. It's still going to hurt a lot, and the S&P 500 is going to be somewhere in between that. So I hope this video helped out a little bit. And, I really do hope that we could see that rally. And if not, then I pray for the best. And I hope that you guys have cash to buy the dip. And maybe in a future video, I could just kind of point out some possible buy targets that I think would be good for some of the mega caps. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and good luck out there.